welcome everybody back to Mindful Mondays with Laura Cross, where we are your resource for education, connection, collaboration to support you on your wellness journey. And as always, I want to start by thanking my sponsors, Karen Wagnon, White Sands Premier Travel, BAM Metric, and Vibe, for it's these sponsored appearances that makes Mindful Mondays possible. So thank you. And I want to start by welcoming everybody to this inspiring episode with this incredible woman, Karen Wagnon. As the founder of Teaching Our Youth and the Parenting Blueprint, Karen has devoted her life to empowering parent coaches and elevating educational excellence. Karen's expertise as a certified human behavior consultant will equip you with the tools and strategies needed to forge meaningful connections with children and families. Karen, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Oh, Laura, thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to sharing with your audience today.
Yes, I'm really looking forward to it. So can you start by telling us, how did your journey as an advocate for empowering parent coaches begin? And what ignited your passion for that important work?
You know what ignited me this passion was failing as a parent. Okay, so let's just call it as it is. I couldn't wait to be a mom, and I was an older mom. I was probably 27, 28 before I started having children. Very successful in my career, so of course I thought I'd have children and I'd be a successful parent, and that was an absolute lie. Okay, it did not. Those transferable skills didn't happen very well, and Laura, I struggled. I couldn't wait to be a parent. I loved kids. And look, I know how to keep them alive. Okay. So, I got the sleeping, the nursing, all that stuff. But when those little personalities started popping up and we started clashing, I was like, what is happening here? And my oldest son was challenging, and maybe I'm thinking, is this really what parenting is all about? But I knew there was something different about Kyle because he was the anti everything. I would ask him to do something, he'd look right at me and do the opposite. Or I'd ask him not to do something, he'd look right at me and do it. And I'm thinking, what do you do with this? And so I resorted back to how my mama parented me, yelling, spanking. And I did not want to be that mom, but I didn't know what else to do because no one teaches you how to raise a human. And I
No.
just think we are led to believe as women that when we have children, we will know. Just follow your instincts, this and that is another lie. Okay. We don't all know. And so here I am struggling as a parent and then hiding behind the guilt and the shame that I'm losing it on my kid and feeling like a failure. But I didn't know what else to do. And I certainly didn't want to own up to it because here I am, successful in my career and doing all these wonderful things. So I hid behind that facade that I was struggling. And it really, and don't get me wrong, I read all the books and I went to workshops and I did all the things that I should do, which was great information, but applying it was different. When you're in the emotion, that stuff's out the window. You know what I mean? Now you're back on your instincts. And it just wasn't working. And it really wasn't until I attended a conference, a business conference, and heard Dr. Robert Rome from Personality Insights speak on understanding different personalities and how people think and act and communicate and where our conflicts are. And I honestly thought I was being punked. Like I'm looking for the camera thinking they've got it right on me because I'm like, how does he know that this is happening in my home? I know I'm in a business setting, but this is happening with my children. Okay. And so I was so intrigued with what he shared. I'm thinking, how come no one teaches this to parents? The DISC model that we work with is very prominent in the business world. Okay, so it's leadership, it's team building, it's client relationships. But this is the most important relationship we will ever have is with our children. And we really did not have a template or a roadmap. And so I went and bought his books, which was great, read all the books, highlighted everything. But then the application, again, I'm still falling flat. So I just went back and said, how do I learn more? And that's when I began my journey of training with him. And again, a lot of the principles were adult relationship based. And so I took the time to do more research and do it more to the adult child relationship in various phases of parenting. And that became the birth of the Parenting Blueprint. We use personality assessments as a foundation on which to build everything. How do I know what strategies will work best on my child if I don't know what motivates my child? See, I'm parenting coming from my style. And I'll be honest with you, my style with my son was like this.
Hmm.
But my strong personality with my other kids could be so overbearing that they would shut down and not engage. So either way, I needed to change. So I needed to adapt what I was doing. I needed to be the mom my kids needed. And each one of them are so different. Each one of them is so different.
Yeah, they are very different, and there's a lot of things that you kind of unpacked in there. Because, for one, I personally do not have kids, but I had tried to have kids for quite a while, and I remember people telling you the same thing. Oh, you'll just know, it'll come to you. It's natural. And I most likely probably would have followed how I was raised because that's what we know, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Because all we bring to parenting, if we really want to take back, is how we're wired, okay, what our personality and how we were parented equals how we parent today, because that's the only experience we have a reference to. And when that is not working, that's when we start fumbling. And because I think society has led us to believe that we should just know it'll come natural, and it doesn't, I think we need to like rip off the veil and say, no one teaches you how to raise a human. And we need to make it a thing. Like we need to make parenting a thing that we need to teach. And, maybe back in the day, we had our grandmothers and our aunts because we were all in the same community and sometimes living in the same home that covered for each other. And we don't have that anymore. I mean, I had my first child. I was 3 hours from my mom, and I am trying to figure this out. And I kind of sort of knew because I read the books, right? But I didn't, I wasn't around to watch my mama parent me. You know what I'm saying? I had no role model at that point to know what to do. And I really struggled. And so it really became a challenge, not only for me personally, of the guilt and the shame that I felt because I knew I was feeling bad. I felt like I was failing my kids. But I also knew that this is not the way it should be with my kids. I should not be ending the day that way. I should not be starting the day that way. And I really needed to have a different approach. And when I understood Kyle's personality, it was like the cloud cleared. And I said, so he's not doing this to be a jerk. He's not doing this to just really irritate me. This is just how he sees life. And so I see life through my lens and his sees life through his lens. And there was a gap. We had a difference in the prescription of the lens. Okay. And so I needed to take off my lens and view life through his lens. And when I did, I was less offended by his behavior because I understood the why behind it. And so, when each of us are wired from birth with our unique personality traits, that each of the personalities have internal emotional needs that drive external behavior. When those needs are not met, we will have disruptive behaviors because the child is still trying to get those emotional needs met. We tend to address the surface behavior. That's what we want to change. But if we don't get to the why and meet the need at the root of the why, behavior will continue and escalate because the child is still not feeling seen, heard, and understood. And so, how do they communicate that? Through behavior.
Yeah, and after I met you, it kind of brought more of a perspective. I can tell you from a kid's point of view, not necessarily from a parent's, but I was the one that was very different, from my sister. And after talking to you and understanding that there's a different perspective, it made me realize a little bit more about how frustrated it probably was for my parents, because I did see things differently. I did do things differently. And it affects you when you're growing up. Because I have gotten to the point now where I think we should all just treat each person like the decent human being that they are. You may not understand, but try to be open and see things from their side. And that's not always what that was when I grew up. So how did you bridge that gap with your son? What
Yeah.
did that process look like?
Right. So it really, the disc model was the tool of understanding. So once I understood that Kyle is wired, and we have the four different personalities of the DISC model. We have the dominant, inspiring, supportive, and cautious. And Kyle's personality style was on the left side of the model. He was dominant and cautious. He is a logic based individual. He is black and white. There is no yield, there is no wiggle room. His way was the right way. So you can see there was a level of determination, stubbornness, like he was uncoachable. But when I saw life through his lens, I was able to begin to adapt my interaction. So for instance, as a strong dominant personality, the internal emotional needs are challenge, choice, and control. If he wasn't being challenged, he was going to become the challenge. And if he didn't have choices and feel a level of control, he would become defiant because he was going to get his way anyway. So here I am dealing with the defiance, trying to break that strong will, not realizing that I needed to adapt to meet those needs. Now, as a dominant personality myself, I like choices and control. I am a recovering control freak, by the way, but I wasn't good at giving him choices because I became the dictatorial mom. What to do, when to do, how to do, right? And so when we butt heads, I'm trying to get him to conform. I'm trying to break his spirit to yield to me instead of coming alongside and offering choices within my boundaries, letting him experience logical consequences for the choice he made. When they didn't work out well, be sad and not mad because I really wanted to be, if you just did what I told you, parents, that does not work. The wall goes up and the defensiveness comes in. So I had a lot of changing that I needed to do in my approach with him. Now, number two son, we're a blended family with seven, by the way. So we've got a lot, and we've got 11 grandkids. So we got a brew going on. And I just love being able to apply. I think human behavior is fascinating. I just
You
love
have lots of practice.
I love to practice, and I just love seeing what comes out of the gene pool. But son number two came out, and he was on the right side. He was very relational. He was very easy. He was more compliant. He was easier to be with. And so what worked with Kyle was not going to work with Eric. If I was direct with Eric, he would probably cry and think he did something wrong and just, pull back from me. So I needed to soften my tone, quiet my body language, be more engaged, physical touch with him. Totally different. Kyle is not physical touch. You hug Kyle, and some of you may experience this. You ever hug somebody and it's like hugging a board? You get pat, pat, pat on the back. You know what I mean? Eric gave you a big old bear hug because he's more relational and Kyle was more task and logic based. It's not right or wrong, but it is different. How can we celebrate that diversity and the differences rather than try and hack them to be what we think they should be instead of parenting them according to their design so they can be the best they can be according to how God wired them? And that's really the most important thing. And even when we had our conversation prior to this broadcast and you started sharing how you were feeling growing up, is a lot of times when kids feel misunderstood, they question themselves. They question their value, their self-esteem, their confidence, all of that. And the most important teachers our children have is in us, the parents. And if they don't feel understood by us, they will go elsewhere trying to find that validation. And parents, that's not necessarily where we want them to be. We want to be able to guide them through every stage of life. But we can only build that when we have that relationship of trust and mutual respect, that our kids know my mama gets me, my dad gets me. I can talk to them about anything in a non-judgmental way.
Yeah, and then that brings up a really good point. So for one, it's kind of freaky because obviously you know this disc model very well. For those who don't know, because I was only introduced to that 8 years ago when I got my major in business,
Yeah.
and it's been around, I believe, for a really
Oh,
long, long
yeah.
time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know if it's been thousands of years, but it's been around for a long
It's been a
time.
long time. Mhm.
And it's, if you've never taken it, it's weirdly accurate because it asks you these weird questions and you think, what does this matter? And you start, and even if you think you know what the question's getting at, if you were meant to be, you come out the same way because I've tried it a couple times. I always come out an IS. I'm not saying some of my things, I am a logical person, but I live more on the IS side. I'm like that 55, 45%,
Yeah.
split. But maybe you can explain to people a little bit more about that, because I only
Sure.
related it to business. I didn't even think about really relating it to people and relationships until I had met with you, because it
Yes.
was brought up to me in a business atmosphere. So
Same here,
I
right?
didn't
So
think
that's
too
where I
much.
was introduced to the disc model, wasn't a business relationship, because that's the business model, right? I mean, it really is a business model. So for our audience, I want to talk about two observations. Okay. So we have our personality assessments and you can check them out on the website and they are very thorough. I'm sure you've done yours. And I know when I did mine and I answered 24 questions and it came back and I was like, this is creepy. How can they know this much about me in 24 questions? And then I'll be honest with you, Laura, I was in denial about some of what it said about me because I didn't want to believe it. And I was like, yeah, well, maybe it is a little bit more accurate than I want to think because I have a strong personality. So, for our audience, let's look at two observations. I try to keep this simple. So when I'm teaching this and we don't have the assessments, there's two observations. The first observation we ask is, what is your pace in life? Or in other words, how does your motor run? So some people are more outgoing or what we would call extroverts. Okay. So extroverts and the outgoing personality tends to be more faster pace in the way their motor runs. Okay. They walk fast, talk fast, eat fast. They're always in a hurry. They tend to be more optimistic and positive, always finding that diamond in the lump of coal. They tend to be the ones always cheerleading everybody on. On the other hand, we have our folks that are more reserved, more of the introverts. And the introverts or the more reserved personalities just prefer a slower pace. They want to think about what they do before they do it. They think about what they say before they say it. They're a little bit more reluctant or cautious to get involved in things right away until they're sure of the expectation or the outcome. It's not right or wrong, but you can see it's different. And so, a lot of times in parenting, if you are a reserved personality and you're parenting an outgoing kid that's bouncing all the time, it's exhausting to you because they have a different pace. That's just the first observation. The second observation we say is, what is your priority in life? Now, how you spend your time will pretty much determine what your priority in life is. Some people are task driven individuals. They're like fine tuned, well oiled machines. We are the list making crowd. We make lists and we check things off the list, and we may have multiple lists. If we've done something in the day that wasn't on the list, we write it down on that list so we can check it off the list. Okay. So we feel like we've gotten more done. They are all about form and function and plans and progress. On the other hand, we have personalities that are more relationship based, which is you. You are very relational, okay? So relational people know they've got things to do and yeah, they can do them. But if you get a phone call and say, you want to meet me for coffee or you want to go to the beach, you're like, out of here, I'm done, packing it up and you're out the door. Why? Because the relationship is more important. The relational people are more open with sharing their feelings and emotions and their time because they're truly at their best when they're interacting with others. And again, it's not right or wrong, but it is different. And so when we put that together, outgoing, reserved, task, and people, now if we had the graph, that's what gives us the dominant, inspiring are the outgoing personality styles, task, and people. And on the bottom of the model, we have the supportive and cautious. Again, relational is the supportive, and the more task driven is the cautious. We are a blend of all four to a greater or lesser degree. Obviously, that's what you shared. You are very, S and I on the relationship, on the relational side, but you probably still have dominant and cautious in your style too. It's just not as predominant. Okay. Just not as predominant. Now, when we understand that as a parent, I am parenting from my personality style. I am dominant and inspiring. So I like to be in charge. I like to be in control, but I like to have fun doing things. Now, when I did things in a fun way and they didn't work, then I became the crazy woman. Okay. I'm going to be direct. So then I'll lighten it up with some humor. And if that's not happening, game's over. You know what I mean? I get harder. And so parents need to understand their personality and what their triggers are when my needs are not being met, when I am being threatened for my choice and control, when I am feeling as though in my inspiring personality that I am not getting recognition or approval from my kids, we start to do some illogical things as well when our needs are not being met. And so that's where we start to feel it bubble up. Like I knew when Kyle was testing me, I could feel it, Laura. I could feel it just building up, but my head's going to blow off, right? And that's when I have to pull back and say, what's really going on here, Karen? Why is he acting this way? Not that he's acting this way, but which of his needs are not being met and how can you meet those needs? Because you yelling at him is not going to change that fact at all. So it's understanding yourself, understanding your child, becoming aware of the personality dynamics in the family. That's the first pillar. The second pillar we focus on is how do I adapt my interactions to meet those social emotional needs on a daily basis and apply the right strategies to parent by design so that I'm not dealing with the out of control behaviors because my child now feels seen, heard, and understood by their parents, the most important relationships in the world to them.
Yeah, and I love that, and that's a tough thing to do, I think probably is to in any situation is to dial yourself back and not just explode and blow up because once it's out there, it's not like you can take it back. You can apologize all you want, but it's still there because it's already been said.
And when we explode and we are out of control, that scares our kids. It really does scare our kids because they don't know at what point that may happen again. And so that's why it's so important for us to know how to regulate ourselves. And there are times, I talk about this in my trainings. I call it the holy pause. 10 seconds, God help me. You know what I mean? I need to step back, separate from this. I need to get back to you on that and really think about what's happening here. Why am I so upset? What is he doing? And what is the need behind that behavior? And how can I go back under control? How can I respond and not react in the emotion in a way that's going to reduce that conflict, increase the productivity because we can work better together
Yep.
and maintain that positive relationship through every conflict that we may have as we're raising our kids. And there's going to be many. There's going to be many. Yeah.
Oh, there is. I don't think that ever ends. Karen, you have so many great nuggets for us, and I know you have more, but we got to take a quick break from a word from our sponsors, and we're going to be right back.
Hi, I'm Bobby Aldridge with BAM Metrics. There are so many programs out there that measure your swing speed, sets, reps, your BMI, your body fat, but the one thing they're not measuring that's so essential is mobility. Mobility is the key. If you're measuring your mobility, your performance will get better and you will reduce your pain. I created BAM Metrics to make it easy for people to repeat the exercises so they could do it properly at home on their own. It's simple, it's easy to do, and from a senior to a pro athlete.
Relief for PTSD, anxiety, pain, insomnia, and many other ailments. Introducing Vibe, the world's only pocket PEMF device. You place it in your pocket while cooking, cleaning, relaxing, watching TV, sitting at your computer, reading, or walking. Self-contained standalone device. No drugs. No other phone or Bluetooth connections required. No monthly subscription fees. No apps to download. No Bozone. The future of medicine is in the frequencies. Come join the revolution.
So, Karen, can you explain to us a little bit about the parenting blueprint, what that is, and how that helps parents and educators?
Yeah. So the parenting blueprint is actually it's a self-paced course. And so when we're working with clients, the parenting blueprint coaches, the first thing we want to do is the assessments. And typically we can do it with a parent and a child. I always recommend let's do the whole family because the family dynamic makes a difference because between parents, we tend to marry our opposite. There will be opposite parenting that will come in that. And so once we get a lay of the land, I call it, we see the personality dynamics and the families start going through the curriculum, which looks at the strengths, struggles, and strategies of parenting different personalities. They totally see what's been going on in their families. It's like it just brings such a new awareness as to why this is happening. And now we can value and appreciate and respect the differences within our kids. So when we have a tool, rather than just, I don't ever want to poo-poo anybody's program, but when we're just looking at strategies, how do I know the right strategy? Because what worked for Kyle was not the same for Eric or for Anna. They're very different kids. And so it's not a one size fits all approach. And so when we take parents on this journey where they can clearly see the family dynamics, we can see that this one has a high trait, but it's very low for the other person. I find where's the gap? Because the gap is where the misunderstanding is. Then as parents go through the self-paced curriculum, they are completing an action plan through each module. And seriously, they're like 20 minutes long. It's not a long time, but it brings such clarity to them that when they complete that action plan and come to coaching, they are already aware of how these dynamics are taking place in their home. And now we're able to help them with the right strategies to adapt their interactions to apply to their children. And so it has been an incredible transformational process, because this isn't just to get them through a season. This is a lifetime. It doesn't change. Our kids' personality is not going to change. And so we will be able to create that relationship that lasts a lifetime. This is the legacy, so my kids call me now that they're buying a house. Okay. Can you look over the paperwork? And Kyle, as hard as that was, when he was buying his first home, he called me, and I don't live in the state, and said, would you come up one weekend and look at houses with me? Are you kidding me? We couldn't agree
You're
on a
needed.
lot of things, and I was thinking, okay, but it's because of the way I had to adapt. He didn't always do the things I thought he should do. He did experience some logical consequences. And rather than be in his face and said, well, if you just did what I told you, you should have done, you wouldn't have been in this place. I say, gosh, I'm sorry you're going through this. What do you think really happened? What do you think you could do differently or better next time? Like, it's helping them think through. So this is what lasts a lifetime. And so when parents get to the end of the 90 days, it's almost like they don't even know who that parent was, because the transformation is taking place. As they begin applying the strategies according to the design of their child, they start to see the conflict reducing. So, we could get into a coaching call and it's like, we had a good week. I don't have any problems to talk about. Now we're starting to see the shift. So parents, can you imagine 3 weeks in and not having conflict at bedtime or chores or getting out the door or homework? Can you imagine? Just as like, this is pretty good, because it's just those little shifts in what we do in our interactions that will reduce that conflict, where that child feels as though they are part of the solution and not the problem. Because we are now communicating and collaborating and not directing and correcting. Now we are working better together. So it really is an incredible process. And Laura, just on a couple of things, my heart is for families. I mean, I love my kids,
Mm-hmm.
but it's messy out there right now.
Yeah.
And parents need help. And as I shared before, I hid behind the guilt and the shame, thinking everybody had it together but me. Let me just say, none of us have it together. we're all winging it. And if you're doing okay, bless your heart, because the rest of the world, we are struggling with this. So it is like, we just need to be open and honest that as parents, this is going to be a whole nother season, and it's going to test you in ways that you never knew you could be tested. And when we sit back and think that we should try and do it on our own, it's not beneficial to us, because we struggle with the guilt, and it's certainly not helping our kids. We get one shot at this, one shot at raising these kids.
Yeah, and that brings up a good point, because when you're talking about the disc, and like you were saying, the personality differences, what about the generational differences? Because today's youth is a much different from the youth that you and I grew up with.
It is. It really is. And so, but one of the things I will say is personalities don't change. We were the same personalities. Now, parenting strategies and our kids' environment and how they interact in their world will. And so one of the things I really like to focus on with parents as well is, what are your values? What do you hold dear to your heart? What are the things that you really want to instill in your child? I mean, we want them to be good kids. We want them to be, good scholars, do well in school. We want them to have these amazing careers. That's but no. What do you really want? What do you want in the character of your child? How can we implement that? And we can only do that through having a relationship with them of trust and mutual respect. A couple of things that I share with families in coaching. And there's two ways that we can go into this. And you may experience this as well. And parents, I want you to think about your own raising. There is a time, and I've experienced this as well, where we look at the difference between an influence and control. There are times as parents where we feel as though we need to control our kids. When we control our kids and they do not feel seen, heard, and understood, we will have a higher level of defensiveness because there's a lower level of trust because that child is not feeling heard. So when parents are butting heads, it's because that child is feeling controlled. None of us want to be controlled. I can think back on a time when people tried to control me. I did not want to be around that person. I didn't care what they said, and I didn't like them. Now, I also think about people in my life that I had a good relationship with, that could influence me because I wanted to do well for them, because I knew that they loved and cared about me. And even when we had to go through difficult things, I didn't resent it or resist it because I didn't feel controlled. I felt understood. So parents, it's so important to know the core values that you want to instill in your kids and what motivates them so they do feel seen, heard, and understood. As I said, Kyle needed the challenge because he was so smart. So, and if I want, and I'm just going to give you an example, homework can be a challenge for parents. Can we say that? I mean, how many parents after dinner, first of all, I will say, I don't think kids should get homework. And that's a whole nother episode. Okay. They just spend 6 hours in school and then they got to do homework. How many of us want to do 6 or 8 hours at work and bring it home? You know what I'm saying? Like nobody wants to do that. And here we are giving kids homework. That's a whole nother story, but it still needs to be done. But how can we do that without the conflict? And so I would have to challenge Kyle. I'd look at his math and say, his problems look really hard. You have 20 problems. You got to get them done tonight. Like, you going to have enough time to get that done? He's like, yeah, I'll get those done. And I'm like, I don't know, Kyle, like they look really hard. I mean, you're going to be able to get them done tonight? And he said, yeah, I can get them done tonight. Can you do them in 20 minutes? I can do it in 10. You can do it in 10? Cool. Set the timer and let them go. I mean, see, I needed to do what? Challenge him.
Challenge.
Rather than say, sit down and do your homework, wah, 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 wah. Like I had to have a different approach. Now, Anna, on the other hand, because she was not real good at math and she had a lot of math problems, she was already defeated just looking at all the problems. You know what I mean? So I would just say, why don't we just do the first couple and show me what you got? And then there were times with her where I had to give her a break. And she was a dancer. So we had kind of a ballet studio in our basement. And it was like, get through half of them and go down and dance for 15 minutes and come back. Because when she would sit and her brain would get weary just from sitting, because as my hubby says, you know, when the bum gets numb, the head gets dumb. You know what I mean? We have our parents are sitting on top of these kids doing homework. Give them a break. Go shoot some hoops for a couple of minutes. Let her go dance for 15 minutes. It invigorates the brain to get back on, and let's do the rest of them. So let's do half, take a break. Let's do another half. But do you see the difference in the personalities and the approach that I needed to take with them? Kyle, I needed to challenge him. Anna, I challenged her, and that girl would just be defeated. I mean, she just would, but it was like, show me what you got. Let's do, I'd have to take it in steps. Let's do some, take a break. Let's do some, take a break. And next, you know, we're done. We're good. You did a great job. You know, so they were different approaches that we needed to take. And so that's what's so valuable about this, because it really can become the conflict. And when kids feel controlled, they will build up that wall and they will go somewhere else. And we have lost the opportunity to influence and guide them. And out in the real world right now, not necessarily the best place to let society raise our kids. And you're right, things are different. Social media is a part of that. The influence of other students, branding and having certain brands that kids feel as though they need to have as a status. I mean, these are things that, as I said, if we instill our values and why we do certain things that we do, that this is what we do in our family. And when you've got that relationship, and let me tell you, it comes from connection, not correction. Doing things with your kids, spending time with your kids, taking a walk with your kids, riding bikes, shooting hoops, like not everybody sitting in their corners on their phones after dinner. Like that's just not happening. Can I tell you how many families are not breaking bread at the table for dinner anymore?
I'm sure it's a very high number.
Right? And then I say, so you start this by putting your kid in front of a tablet for a meal, and then you wonder why they're not talking to you at the dinner table. I don't care if they're 3 years old and they only sit for 4 minutes. But every night we sit at the table and we break bread together and we talk about our day. And then parents wonder why we have a disconnect when we get into adolescence, because we weren't instilling this in the beginning. And now we need to shift it back, and they're like, what's going on? The same thing with chores. If we are not giving our kids responsibilities and chores, I don't care if it's put the silverware away or throw out the napkins from dinner for the little ones. I mean, anything as simple as that everybody contributes. Then parents get to the point where they have adolescents and teens and it's like, they don't do anything. Well, did you ever ask them? And let me tell you, I fell into that trap. It's a lot faster for me to just get it done. But what was I teaching them? Mom will do it. Mom will do it. Then we have that conflict. And then it's like, well, I needed to dial that back. And even if it takes more time, even if I have to show them how it's done, even if I need to teach that, we're teaching soft skills, but also how contribution is important. And kids who do chores are better employees in the workplace.
I grew up doing chores and doing a lot of things, and we used to always sit at the table. But as things progressed, you see more and more where, and it's not your fault. People do what they have to do. I mean, some people are working 2, 3 jobs to make
Yep.
ends meet,
Yep.
and unfortunately, it's letting the electronic world raise their kids.
It is. And there's a cost to that. And I understand when our kids got older and there were after school activities, we weren't able to do that every night, but Sunday was our day. You know what I mean? So that was our time if we had a family meal because our kids had jobs. And so I get that. But in the beginning, when they're younger and we have the opportunity to do that together, and even if it's just one parent because the other one's working, it's so important to have that connection, because we need connection before correction. Because if we don't have connection and all we do is correct, that's when that defensiveness will come up and that child feels control, because we don't have the relationship. So these are some of the tools that we want to provide when parents get a parenting blueprint, is how do I build that connection with my kids? Because see, you're a very relational personality. And if you are trying to connect with the child who's very direct, like they don't do warm and fuzzy stuff. Like it's just not part of their DNA. So they're like, it's just weird, awkward, and they go off. But if you find a way to connect with them in their place, they will feel understood. I did gaming with my kids. I'm not a gamer. I drove Mario Kart all over the place. I couldn't drive Mario Kart, but it was something we did together and we laughed, and mom was terrible at it, but that's what we did. You know what I'm saying? Like, get to their level and do things together and engage. It's so important. And our families are struggling, and society is changing. And we really need to get back to those foundational principles of relationships first.
Yeah, it's funny when you were describing, the different children and how you work with them, because since I'm an ambivert, I'm in the middle. I kind of like resonate with both. If somebody tells me there's something I can't do, it's like challenge accepted. Let's go. But on the other hand, I have learned, especially when I went back to college courses in like 2017, and I'm like, I just kept wanting to get done. It's like, you know what? I just needed to get up and walk away before I wanted to throw the computer out. And if I got away and did something I enjoyed, it was enough to reset my head. So I realized that it may seem like you're postponing it, but you're not, because you're clearing your head and it actually comes to you and you get done a lot quicker than if you were to sit there and keep banging your head up against the wall.
That is absolutely right. You nailed it right there. And sometimes parents don't see that. Like they feel as though if I let the kid up, then I'm
and he'll never come back.
Right. We're not giving in, but there needs to be that communication. Like, why don't we take 10 minutes and go this and set the timer on I used to do the microwave, and I set the timer on the microwave. And then when the microwave came off, then it was time to come back and get back at it. They knew at that point, they knew I was willing to work with them and not against them. Right.
Yeah.
They felt understood. Mom gets me, dad gets me. And that's the whole premise of being able to parent according to their design, because each child is going to need me to be a little bit different.
Yeah. So the not one size fits all approach that your parenting blueprint takes, would you say that that's what differs you from the other philosophies that are out there?
Yeah. We are different. We're the disruptors, and look, there are wonderful parenting philosophies out there, but how do I know what works? I don't think gentle parenting would have worked with Kyle. I just don't. No, that was not. I needed to be lovingly firm and set firm boundaries with him. And the other kids being more reserved and more people pleaser, they were okay with the boundaries, but I also had to soften my approach so they would still feel safe to talk to me. I needed to lower my tone, calm my body language. So they felt that they could come to me about anything. If I was high energy, and I am, it would be like they didn't want to talk to me because I would be short with them. I would bark back at them. I really needed to know when I was coming into their world, I needed to adapt, the second pillar, to meet their needs so that they felt as though we could talk about anything. And as they got older and things were going to happen, they were going to experience different things, experience different environments. I didn't want them to not feel as though they could come to me and share. Now, was it easy to hear some of the things that they shared with me? It's scary. It's a scary world out there. But if they felt safe about what they saw or what they experienced, and we could then navigate through, these are learning opportunities. But if our kids are hiding that from us, or they're just talking to their peers and friends, and we are not a part of that world, we do not have that opportunity to guide and navigate them through these things. I remember Anna going to school and saying, how can people smoke weed and go to school? Yeah, how much they're smoking weed on the bus now. Now, granted, she's 30 years old, and I'm sure there's a lot more going on the bus now than back then, right? But
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, she's like, how can they think and they're smoking weed on the bus? I was like, so how did that make you feel seeing that they were doing this? You know what I mean? And how many kids were doing this? And how to, are you interested in trying that? Or would you want to try? I mean, like, we just have to have these conversations. And did they try alcohol? Did they try certain things? Yeah, but that's going to be out there. Kids are going to test it. But if I didn't know or feel as though we could have that, look, Eric threw up in my driveway one night. Yeah. I knew who it was, and guess who had to hose it off in the morning? And then he still had to do his chores on a hangover. You know what I'm saying? So parents, it's just like, yeah, sorry that happened. Guess Matt won't be doing that again, right? Instead of it's learning opportunities, and then talking about their friends and their peers and the influence that they can have, and that who you hang around with is who you're going to become, and then how can you be the light in their darkness, that you can help lead kids and influence them to making better choices than they did. I mean, there's so many things we can do, but we cannot do that if we don't have the relationship of trust and mutual respect.
So when you do the parenting blueprint, and I know it's parenting and it's for educators and stuff, and do you do the disc with the kids at all, or
Yeah.
just strictly with the so everybody does it?
Yeah. So we have different assessments. We have the adult assessment. We have them for children, which could be, I'm going to say, from the age 4 until maybe 10 or 11. That assessment is actually done in a storybook form. So when we take the assessment, they give you word groups, and you need to choose what is most like me or least like me. And in the children's book, they tell a story. In the children's assessment, they tell a story. There's 4 robots. They're gender neutral, obviously, because they're robots. So it's not what boys would do or girls would do. But they have a situation, and each one of them is taking care of something. And then you ask the child which one is most like you or least like you. Very similar. Okay, in asking those when you read the story. And then we go into the teen assessment, which is similar to the adults, where you have the word descriptions. The teen assessment is amazing, parents. I'm telling you, there is a section for the child to read about themselves. And it's done in a very positive way to feel good about who they are, especially when they're in adolescence and they're starting to look and compare with other people. Like, well, they have this and I can't do that. Why can't I be? And my kids went through that same thing, gravitating as they're trying to find themselves and trying to be like others because they weren't quite sure who they were. And so to be able to do that, there's a section for them to learn about themselves, the positive things that they have, the preferred environments, their communication style, where they are at their best. There's one area on that they need to be aware of that could get them in trouble, but it's just one page. Then there's a middle section for the parents on how do I parent this child. The third section is for the educators on the best environment and learning style of that student. And then in the back of the teen assessment is a guide on, based on their personality, what would be career choices that would fit them naturally based on their natural abilities. It is amazing. And then when we do the family, we're able to create kind of like a family graph chart, and we can see mom's here and son's here, or dad's there and daughter's there, and we see where the gap is. Or we see the kids that are closer in our style, and then we see that it's an easy connect because we understand each other. But that's not the parents who come to me, the ones who understand each other. The parents who come to me is like, I don't know what to do with this. So let me tell you what happens. When parents have this gap and they don't understand, the first thing they want to do is an assessment, therapy. And I've had parents who've done all of those things and came back, and this brought them clarity. Because now we get to the root of the why it's happening. When inspiring personalities do illogical things, they're looking for recognition and approval. And if you are a very task-driven personality, the cautious style for say, that's the polar opposite of the inspiring style. And you just see this kid bouncing off the wall and doing crazy things, and you're trying to squash their light. They feel as though they're just not good enough for you. And that's something they take into their future. Now, I'm not saying that all the personalities and all our kids don't need to be pruned. Because discipline is a discipline of self-discipline. We need to teach our kids to be disciplined within their style to be the best they can be. But as parents, when we see a child that's different, we start assessing for ADHD or OCD, and I'm not saying, or OD. I mean, can I tell you how many people told me that Kyle was ODD, oppositional defiant disorder? Oh, and he was. But then I read his personality and said, but this is how God wired him. Do I want to label him, or do I just need to change my approach to parenting him?
And accept him for who he is.
And accept him for who he is.
Yeah.
I think, neurodiversities are real and they're out there, but I also see that when parents understand the personality, this is what happens. They get out of control if those needs are not being met. And now it does go to the fringes. Okay. And so if we can provide parents the right tools and strategies, we don't need to medicate as much because we are now giving them the tools to build that relationship, set boundaries, follow through, and prune that wild child, okay? Have that dominant child have choices within their boundaries, okay? The supported child needs more affirmation and appreciation, and the cautious child questions everything. They are the perfectionist. They are the perfectionist. They need quality answers. They ask a ton of questions. They need the best value in anything they have, and they really need excellence in themselves, and they expect it from everybody else. And so when you have a cautious parent who expects perfection and excellence, and they are parenting a wild child, can you see the gap? Okay. And so
There's a big gap.
once parents see it, it's like, okay, there's nothing wrong with my child. That's just how God wired them. So how do I adapt to help that child not be so wild? Pruning, but still allow them to be who they are at the core of their being. It's an amazing framework. I mean, and I just find that if you don't ever have to work with another human being the rest of your life, you don't need to know this. But that's not how we work.
No, we all need that connection, the human connection. So
do.
even if it's not with your child, it's normally with business relationships or personal relationships. It's everywhere.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. That's
Because
what
I don't think any of us were really wired to be alone.
No. Although the cautious personality doesn't mind being alone. In fact, sometimes they prefer it.
You have those moments, but yeah.
And then there's recovery. I mean, we talk about stress recovery. I'm going to give you another little tidbit. As parents, when we get overwhelmed in our zone of parenting, we need to step back. And this comes back under self-care, right? How do I do self-care? As a dominant mom, when I am feeling overwhelmed, I need to do something because I'm a doer, right? Mm-hmm. So I like to work in the garden. I like to blow up the kitchen and cook, but I have to do something. I need to step away from something, but I still need to do something. The inspiring personality who's very relational, their recovery is go to happy hour, go to a baseball game, like go have lunch with a friend. Like they need to go away from the kids, but that's how they recover away from the kids. It's not going to the grocery store without a child. That is not it, folks. Okay. I know as a mom that was like my sanctuary at the moment, but that still wasn't recovery. That was just me away from the kids. I still wasn't nurturing my soul so that when I got back to my kids, I felt recovery, that I was ready to go back in and parent again. So they're very relational. For the supportive personality, and so you're the I and S. For the supportive personality, it's do nothing. It's Netflix and a blanket and don't anybody talk to me, okay? They don't want to engage. They just power down. They power down. And for the cautious personality, they're more cognitive thinking. So they do like puzzles and reading books and even gaming because it's in themselves. It's challenging, mental challenge, okay, in their heads. So it's not right or wrong. It's different. And if you are not recovering according to your style and what your needs are, you are going to burn out and burn out quickly. And so when I am coaching parents and we see their personality, I always say, so what are you doing for you this week? Not that you need to do it every day, but can you do it once a week? Can you do it a couple times a month where you get away from your kids and be able to do those things where you can really nurture your soul so that you step back into parenting refreshed and ready to get back in it? Now, For moms, I know it's real hard to carve out that time and the guilt that you will feel when you begin doing it. But when you've taken that time, and I had a young mom, she was a single mom, and I told her she really needed some relational time. So when the child was with the dad on those weekends, that's when you don't just clean the house and do your laundry. You need to get out and engage in relationships. And she did that. And by the time her son came back, she was so happy to see him. It's like she was happy to see him. Like it was a totally different feel and a vibe. When you step out and you nurture your soul, you can come back in and feel better because you've recovered from the stress of parenting. And parenting is stressful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Karen, we have got 4 minutes left, and I know you and I could go on for a long time, but you have a wonderful, I believe it's a podcast, right? Real Talk with Coaches, where I'm sure you are sharing a lot more of your tidbits and other perspectives on there. Would you like to tell
Yeah.
us about that?
So, Real Talk with the Parenting Blueprint Coaches. Right now, we are on YouTube. And so, we are training coaches with this framework and philosophy. So, we love diving into different topics as it pertains to parenting because even as coaches, we may have different perspectives, but we all build it on the foundation of the DISC model. How would we adapt our interactions in this particular situation based on the personality of the kids? So, we want to keep it real, but we also want to give parents strategies and takeaways that they can begin to apply after listening to it. So I hope your audience would be able to check us out and subscribe and join us for some of our topics. And there's always an opportunity. If there's a topic that you're looking for, let us know and we can dig into that one too.
I love that. So, in the last 3 minutes we've got, what would you like to leave the audience with? Because I know there's so much and we could keep going, but
Yeah. So parents, I just want to tell you that being a parent is the most important role you will ever have in your life. And we get one shot at raising these kids. But this job, if you want to call it a job, will test you in ways that you never knew you could be tested. And it's okay to feel that way, but I don't want you to feel that you need to stay there alone. Okay. So there are resources out there. There are opportunities to connect with. And honestly, I didn't always work with a coach, but when I did work with a coach, change happened. When I tried to do it on my own, I lived in my own world of frustration. But when I started working with someone who understood me, held me accountable to making the changes I needed to make, that's when shift happened. And that's where transformation came into play. And then I look back and say, I remember that mom, but that's not who I am anymore. So if you are really struggling internally and feeling the guilt and shame as I did, reach out to us. Go to the website. We've got different coaches that have different frameworks and different age groups that they work with or philosophies. And, either you can work with me or work with one of the other coaches, but this will change your life. It totally did for me. I wasn't as frustrated with my kids because I understood who they were. And at that point, I was able to celebrate their diversity and their differences and help them be the best they could be according to their design.
thank you, Karen, so much. I got to say, I really love your energy and all the work you're doing. And I think that is so important. It's such an important message to help people reconnect and have that connection to fill those gaps with their kids. So thank you for taking the time to sharing that with us.
Laura, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Everybody, have a wonderful week, and we will see you next time on Mindful Mondays with Laura Cross.